Today we're going to be looking at measuring with a ruler again. So yesterday we talked about how rulers often have two sides. One side measures in inches and the other side measures in centimeters. The ruler that I have today is only inches, so that will be a little bit easier for me to know which side to use. That is tip number one, make sure that you're using the correct side of the ruler or tool. Step two is to line the edge of the object with the end of the ruler or on zero. So on this one, we talked about this yesterday, my zero is not all the way at the end there. I've got some space here, so I would need to line my object up with the zero. Whereas on this one, zero is not even on here because the end is zero. So on this one, I can just use the end as my starting point. And then step three, or tip three, is find where the object stops. Look at the nearest number to find the measurement. So today we're going to be continuing practicing measuring, but we're also going to be adding in estimating. Now you've probably heard that word before. Maybe you've seen a jar full of jelly beans and they say, estimate how many jelly beans are in the jar. Or maybe your parents have said, I'm going to estimate it'll take us about 15 minutes to get there. So estimating is kind of like a hypothesis in science, where we're going to use what information we already know in our head, and we're going to make our best guess. Not just a random number or random thought. We're really going to think about it, and we're going to make our best guess. So here are the steps that we're going to use when we estimate in lengths. Okay, this first step is to think about the size of the object. So you might be looking at that object, you might just be considering. If it's a really long distance, you might not be able to see the whole thing, but you're going to think about the size. Step two is you're going to choose a unit of measurement. So far we've only really been focusing on inches, and that's what we'll be estimating today. But as we get further into our unit, we'll be talking about feet, yards, centimeters, meters, all kinds of different units of measurement. So we're gonna think about it, choose a unit, consider the size of the unit of measurement. So here's where you think about similar things in the real world that are about that size. For example, Mr. Styles' foot or shoe is about a foot long, 12 inches, because 12 inches is 1 foot. That's about how long his shoe is. And so when he's wanting to measure something in feet, he can take steps with his shoes to kind of measure that out. We're gonna think more in terms of inches. One thing I always like to do is look at my thumb, and the area from my knuckle to the end is about, to my fingernail, is about 1 inch. Do you see that? I always have this on me, right? So I can use that to help me. So if I'm considering that, I'm considering, okay, how many of these long is this object, right? And that gives me a frame of reference. Then I'm going to predict the measurement. I do not have to be correct. It is okay to be wrong. It's just an estimate. An estimate does not have to be correct. It just helps us to strengthen our spatial awareness and our ability to estimate when we do these exercises. But if you get all of your estimates wrong, that's okay. It's no big deal. We're just practicing. So we're going to predict the measurement. And the last step is then to measure the actual length of the object using the measurement tips that we talked about yesterday and earlier on. Okay, so we're going to do some practice of this by measuring some, or estimating and then measuring some worms, some squirmy wormies. Okay, so we're gonna follow these steps and estimate and then measure the length of these worms. Now, these worms aren't totally straight, so we're not going to really get an accurate measurement of how long they really are if we were to stretch them out. These are things that we could use other tools for. For example, I could use like a piece of string here and curve it along and then straighten that out and measure it. But we're just wanting an estimate of about how long this worm is, and so we're not going to worry too much about that. So the first step is to estimate how long I think this worm is. Now remember, I told you that this is about 1 inch, so if I think about that next to the worm, how many of these do I think the worm is? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 maybe. So I'm going to estimate that it is 5, and then I'm going to put IN for inches. So now I've thought about the size. I chose inches as my unit of measurement. I considered the size using my thumb, and I predicted the measurement. So now we're ready to measure the actual length. So now I'm going to line it up with the end of my squirmy wormy. Then I'm going to pull it down just a little bit so that I can see the closest number, and the closest number it lines up to is 6. So the actual length of my squirmy wormy is 6 inches. I'm gonna put IN for inch. Okay, now notice my estimate wasn't correct, was it? But I was pretty close. I wasn't too far off. And that's okay, right? That's the point, is that we're just practicing estimating. All right, so let's look at this second worm. Again, we're gonna go through these steps to estimate the length. So we're going to think about the size of this worm, and I can even think in comparison to this guy, right? Choose a unit of measurement. Again, we're going with inches. Consider the size of 1 inch and predict the measurement. I'm thinking this guy kind of looks like he's halfway between this, and this was 6 inches. So I'm going to estimate 3 inches. So now let's try. I'm gonna line it up with the end. Remember, you need to start at 0, or if 0 is the end, I'm gonna pull this down, and what do you know? The closest number is 3. So it is 3 inches. See, I'm already getting a little better. All right, so now let's look at this next guy. So this one is 6, and this one is 3. I'm thinking that this one is about 1 thumb space smaller. So my estimate is 2 inches. So now I'm ready. Line it on up. Slide it down. And hot diggity dog, it is 2 inches. Okay? Now this guy, he is about half of the 2-inch worm. Half of 2 is 1, so my guess is 1 inch, but he may be even smaller than that. I'm not sure. Let's see. Line it up, pull it down. Yep, he is 1 inch. I'll lift this flap, it's sticky. 1 inch for that guy. All right, now this next one, let's see, it's smaller than 5. Or actually, this one was actually 6. And it's bigger than 3. So it could be somewhere in between 3 and 6, so 4 or 5. I'm gonna estimate, thinking about my measurement, I'm thinking maybe this one is 5 inches. I was wrong last time. I thought this one was, and it was 6. So maybe this one's 5. Let's go ahead and measure, line it up. I'm gonna pull it down, find my nearest number, and it is 4. 4 inches is the actual measurement. So if this one is 4, I'm thinking this one has to be 5. What do you think? 5 inches is my estimate. I'm going to line it up and find my closest number. 5 inches is correct. Finally, I put 5 and it was right. I had 2 other ones that weren't quite right. Okay, so what you're going to do now is the same thing, except for you are going to be predicting the estimate of your parts of a robot. So in your measurement math pack that looks like this, you need to find this pack. You're going to open up to the page that has your robot on it, okay? And your robot, you're going to estimate the various parts of your robot, and then you're going to write your estimate in, and then you'll measure to find the actual amount, just like I did with my Squirmy Wormies. You're going to do that with your robot. So in schoolwork, there is a recording page that's going to ask you to record your estimate. For example, let's say estimate of the head of the robot. So you would say, I think maybe it's 4 inches. You would record that in schoolwork, and then you would actually measure, and the head is 3 inches. So under actual measurement, you would write 3 inches. You'll do the same thing for the body, for the ear, and so on. So that's going to be your practice today. Remember, remind yourself, it is okay to be wrong. It's just an estimation. You're going to be using all inches today, and make sure you follow those steps that we were talking about to find that estimate. Go get to work.